Campers! Welcome back to the Met Opera Global Summer Camp Career Corner. I am your host, Susan Blackwell, and I am so curious. I actually just asked you this in the chat. Where are you watching from? What's the coolest thing that happened this week? Let me know by throwing it in the chat thread. And I already see. And also, what were some of your favorite parts of the Magic Flute? I'm just looking. Dancing Cat 2.0. Hi, Dancing Cat 2.0. I liked making puppets and making them sing. I'm with you. I love that. Lucia Ray, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Wait, Lucia, your comment went away. I have got to say the story time. I love that you love that, Lucia. And Ariella Meyer says, meeting Will Liverman. Those are great highlights. Those are great highlights. Maggie says, everything was cool, but I liked the arts and crafts the most. I love that, Maggie. I love that you loved that. And I'm also curious, Magic Flute. What are you loving about the Magic Flute? What are your favorite parts? Maybe we'll hear from you in a bit. So, where are we? We are so excited for today's discussion. And I want you to know, as always, you're going to have a chance to ask our special guests questions using the chat feature. So once we get started, as much as you can, if you could just keep the chat comments and your questions related to the conversation that we're having so that we can pick some really great questions to ask our guests, that would be awesome. And I thank you in advance for that. We are thrilled to have two very special guests in today's Career Corner. Normally we just get one person. Today we get two awesome people. They have absolutely fascinating jobs at the Metropolitan Opera. Will you please welcome to the Career Corner two of the Met's assistant conductors, Howard Watkins and Bryan Waghorn. Howard, Bryan, welcome to Career Corner.
Hi.
It's so nice to see you. We always like to start with a little game that I call 60-second life story. I'm pulling out my timekeeper. I'm putting 60 seconds on the clock, and each of you get 60 seconds to tell us your life story. Please don't leave out the awesome parts. Howard, I'm going to start with you. You have 60 seconds starting now.
Hi, everybody. I'm Howard Watkins. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, which is in the middle of the country. Yay, Dayton. It looks like Susan's from there too, maybe. I went to high school at a school called Alter High School, a Catholic school. And I went to University of Dayton for my undergraduate. Then I went up to Michigan, University of Michigan. I did my master's there. I used to work with dancers, actually, and I played a lot for dance. And then I did a doctoral degree in piano accompanying and chamber music. And right after that, I came to New York City, which had always been my dream. And now I've been in New York for 22 years. And working at the Metropolitan Opera is amazing, and meeting wonderful people like Bryan and Susan, and now all of you.
You have 8 seconds left.
8 seconds left. Go Knights, Alter Knights, go Blue, Michigan.
That was a mind-blowing 60-second life story. I have a lot of follow-up questions, but before I get to them, Bryan, 60 seconds on the clock. Don't leave out the awesome parts. Starting now.
Ooh, so much pressure. Okay, so I'm Bryan Waghorn, and I'm from Canada. I'm from up north, from a really small town outside of Ottawa. And I did my studies there in piano, and then I came to New York to finish my studies. So I did my master's and my doctorate in New York. And then I joined the Met. And of course, yes, meeting amazing people like Howard and working with the singers has been so great. And so this is 14 years in New York and almost 10 years at the Met. So it's been quite a long time, and just getting to share music and see the performances and be part of the performances is just so special, and sharing with all of you who are listening. So did I do well? Is that 60 seconds?
You have 20 seconds left.
Oh my God, I was too short. Okay. So well, are there Canadians out there? I hope there
You're
are
getting a lot of Canadian love. If you look in the
good.
lower third, there are 2 people that have already given you some Canadian love. 3 people. Yes,
Oh,
Canada. So
I love it.
we're gonna round out your 60 seconds with a lot of love for Canada.
Great, thank you.
Those were 2 excellent 60-second life stories. Howard, you know I have to follow up with you. I was born and raised in Dayton, Ohio.
Incredible. I love it.
I love it too. And it's so interesting to me because there's a lot of, you think Dayton, Ohio, it's sort of like, I don't know, I always think of it like Scranton, Pennsylvania or something. But there's a lot of like really cool, talented, creative people who have come out of Dayton, Ohio, including Steve Reinecke, who's also a conductor at the New York Pops.
Oh
Crazy.
my God, it's fantastic. I love it. Yeah, Dayton is a great place. There's a lot going on there. Beautiful art museum, a lot of musical life. It's really close to Cincinnati. It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you still have family there? Do you go back?
I do. My family's in a suburb of Dayton called Centerville, which is in the south.
You are killing me. After this career corner is over, we're going to have just like a long Dayton catch-up connection.
I love it.
I love it. When we were in high school, we used to sing. There was a carol that we learned in choir, and we changed the words to include your high school name. We would say, "Little altar boy, I wonder would you play basketball for me?" So that's so that was our homage to your school and your basketball team.
Yeah, great.
Bryan, I'm also equally excited about Canada. I've had wonderful visits to Canada. I just wasn't born and raised there, but I'm super stoked that you're here too.
Yeah, no, it's a great country. I miss it. I'll head back to visit my family and whatnot eventually.
Are they still there? Do you still have family there?
They're all outside of Ottawa and sort of like living in the countryside or out of the city. And so I'll go up probably in a month or 2 to go back and visit over the summer. It's nice over the summer. It's very, very cold over the winter.
Yes.
So I recommend visiting over the summer, but that's just me. Snow is great too. But
Bryan, did you grow up sort of in a more rural environment where your family lives now?
It was a tiny little town of about 2,000 people.
Wow.
And so we did not have an opera company, as you can imagine. But we had recordings and we had radio and we had all of that good stuff. So that was sort of my earlier exposure is through, recorded music.
I always think it's interesting I grew up in a very rural area outside of Dayton. And I think it's interesting when people, I used to think, I talked a little bit about this with the director Mary Zimmerman when she was in the Career Corner. I used to think because I grew up in a very rural area that was outside of a city, there was, I used to believe that it was the privilege of other people who had maybe grown up in cities, people who had been exposed to the arts from a very young age, that it was their privilege to get to be the conductors and the makers and the directors and the creators. And I learned as I got older that you can come from anywhere. You can come from, rural Canada where it's very cold in the winter. And just because your town didn't have an opera company doesn't mean that you can't have a really exciting, vibrant, successful, creative life in the arts.
It's true, yeah. And I mean, even with opera, with hearing music in different languages, you don't even need to understand the language to feel the power and the impact of it. So I feel like with opera, there should be no barriers. It's really for everyone.
I love that. Now, you mentioned it a little bit, and I'm interested to hear from you, Bryan, on this, and Howard as well. You were able to access via recordings. Is that how you first were experiencing opera and loving opera?
Yeah, so I listened to the radio and just, the normal radio, pop music and things, and I really
just old terrestrial pop radio.
just the normal stuff, So I'd listen to that and I sang along a lot and I just kind of enjoyed music. And so it's my mom that decided to put me in some sort of music lessons. And there was a piano teacher locally, so it made sense to do piano lessons. So I started and I just took to it right away, and I kind of just would come home from school and practice, and my family's like, okay, if you like doing that, go for it. And so I'd get CDs and I would just sort of learn bit by bit. And that's how it happened. So I was really glad to have that opportunity.
And was it classical piano predominantly?
It was classical. Yeah, it was basically classical. Maybe a little bit of jazz here or there, like some Gershwin or something like that, but pretty much just classical. And yeah, that's how it happened for me.
What about you, Howard? How did you first come into this world of music?
I for some reason I think when I was about 7 or 8, I started taking guitar lessons. So I played classical guitar,
Oh,
and shortly after, my sister started playing piano, and I thought, well, I want to take piano lessons too. So I took some piano lessons, and it really took much more to that. It was more fun and didn't hurt my fingers like
interesting.
guitar did. Um, and I just really enjoyed playing piano. I would sit and play all day and all the time, and it's always been a lot of fun. I also play bassoon and saxophone, or at least used to, uh,
Okay.
and haven't done that in a while. But I just love making music. When I was a kid, on Saturdays, I used to go down to downtown Dayton and go to the library and get big stacks of records and books, and I just loved listening. And I got more and more into all kinds of classical music, opera, a lot of opera, and would follow along with the booklets and was fascinated by the stories, and just really got into it when I was a little kid.
I love that, Howard. I've spent a lot of time in that library. I've spent a
Hmm.
lot of time in those record player listening stations in that
Yeah,
library on the first floor.
yeah.
And we would also go once a week and we would get out stacks of what I loved musicals, like Broadway musicals. And I also loved old radio shows. And
Oh, yeah.
so I feel like listening to like hours and hours of like uh, Burns and Allen and Baby Snooks and old radio shows.
Yeah, I
It
loved it.
definitely those are things that form our brains, aren't they? Those early
Absolutely.
listenings. Yeah, I love that. So let's start with some basics. Can you tell us, maybe Brian, can you tell us what your job title is? And quick follow up, what does it mean? Like, what do you do?
Sure. So the exact job title is assistant conductor. That's the title in our contract. And it means a lot of things, actually. And that's what's fun about the job. So it means we could be playing in rehearsals where basically it's just the singers and a pianist, maybe a conductor. And we're playing the opera, the orchestra parts on the piano. And the singers could be learning their staging, learning the moves. So there's that process that happens every day. Then there's the one-on-one process, which is also a lot of fun, where maybe there's a singer that just wants to go through the role. Maybe it's their first time doing it. Maybe they want to work on certain parts. So we would just get in a room with them one-on-one and go through it. And we give them advice that might help. We listen to, if they have a question or, there's something that's challenging, we can talk about that. So there's that aspect. And then the other fun aspect is, and Howard and I do this a lot, is playing in the orchestra. So some of
Oh,
these operas have piano parts or they have glockenspiel parts. Magic Flute has the glockenspiel. So Howard and I play a lot of instruments, actually. I mean, we've both played the organ, the celesta, the harpsichord. It's sort of one of those things where you don't really know what you're signing up for at first, but you get put into all these interesting experiences. So I would say those are three of the big things. There's the rehearsals with all the singers, the one-on-one, and then the orchestra. And Howard, I don't know how you would describe it,
Oh,
or
I think you said it perfectly. I would just add, I sometimes tell people that our title is assistant conductor, but it's really more in the sense that we are an assistant to the conductor, not that we actually conduct necessarily in the rehearsal. And yeah, it's so much fun to work with the singers in the room and play all these other instruments. Sometimes with some operas, like Mozart operas or Rossini operas, they have parts where the orchestra plays, but then parts where it's just the harpsichord, maybe harpsichord and cello, and the singers doing the staging on stage. So in those times, we get to play in the performance, and that's a lot of fun.
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
So this is you do so much that your job title encompasses so much. And I'm just curious, and maybe Howard, you can speak to this. what might an average day look like for you? Is there such a thing as an average day, and
Sure.
what might it look like?
Well, an average day for us, if it changes a little bit as the process goes, but let's say we're at the beginning of when the opera is starting to rehearse. We usually start rehearsing around 10:30 or so, and 10:30 to 1:30 we'll be in the room playing the orchestra parts on the piano. The singers will be learning their moves, their walking, their staging, and practicing it over and over again, and usually just a little bit of the opera. And this will go on for a couple of weeks until we've actually prepared the whole opera. So I'm saying 10:30 to 1:30, we'll have a little lunch break, and then 2:30 to 5:30, we'll do more of that kind of staging. We may go into the room. One person may stay and play, and the other person go in the room with the singer and work individually, which is lots of fun. And we all work a lot with languages too. That's another big part of our job. So
Absolutely.
sometimes when we're in the room, we're listening to the singers, helping them with the music and the languages and the memory. Lots of things. Lots of things.
So many things. You have to have mastery of so many things. Brian, were you going to say something?
Well, one of the fun things too is that because the Met is doing so many operas at once, it's like Monday night it'll be a Mozart opera, Tuesday night it'll be a Verdi opera. So, and we're also rehearsing multiple things at once. So it could be that, Monday morning German opera, Monday night French opera. So it's sort of like all these things going on at once. It's like going to a restaurant and ordering everything on the menu, So
And just
it's
having a little bite of each thing.
Yeah.
exactly. So within each opera, we're multitasking, but we're also working on multiple operas at once, which is like this giant sort of multitask. So it's a lot of fun. There's never a boring day in our job. Definitely.
Do you all have any? I'm struck every time I talk to somebody in the career corner who works at the Met. I think, wow, you have to be responsible for so many things. Like you have to have mastery of language. You have to have mastery of music and singing. And there's so many things involved. And every single person also has to have mastery of organization. Like you have to be so organized because there's so much going on at one time, and your every single day includes lots of layers of multitasking. Do either of you have any good advice you want to give us about how you stay organized?
Well, I would say, as much as I tried to stay organized, the thing that works the best for me is to try to think far ahead. So if I know that I have to start rehearsing a show on, let's say September 7th, let's just pick a date, September 7th. I think when the middle of August comes, I need to already be pretty far along to being ready to go. It doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect by the middle of August, but if I wait until September 1st to start getting the show ready, I'll be in big trouble. And we have to think of ourselves as part of the team that's doing the teaching, doing the work. We're not the ones who have to come in and say, I don't know how this goes.
Yeah, you have to have that mastery.
Right.
Brian, any thoughts from you about how to keep our lives organized?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. It's just preparation in advance. So you just can't cram these operas. So you have to learn them in advance. You have to do the work because, it's lots of music. Some of these operas are hundreds of pages long.
Yeah.
And you can't just say, okay, I'm going to do that the week before.
Slow and steady.
Yeah. So you have to organize and just kind of have like an overview of each month and what you're going to focus on that month. And within each week, okay, this is going to be a really busy beginning of the week, so I should really make sure I get enough rest and make sure I'm really prepared. And also, I think, like what Howard said, like having good colleagues, we're all so friendly with each other and helping each other. And I couldn't do this job if that wasn't the case because, some days maybe you're really tired or there's an opera you really love and you want to do more playing or you want to do more coaching. So we have such great colleagues and we're so flexible that makes it really good. So I can't imagine doing it alone or if I had to just sort of, do it all myself. So
I love that. So Andrea Lynn just said, you really have a fun job. And I think it does sound, it is my experience too at the Met that the people are great, and they're just like top of their game. They're so good at what they do, but they're also really fun.
Yeah.
And I do think that goes a long way, especially when you're working so hard to
Yeah.
make those days, those really hard long days, fun. That's
Yeah.
great. You were just referring to language and how you have to be able to have a level of mastery of the language in order to be of support to the singers who have to get out in the middle of that great big metropolitan opera stage and sing that language. And so we have a great question from Izzy from Anchorage, Alaska about language. Here we go.
Ah.
Hi, my name is Izzy, and I am from Anchorage, Alaska. My question to Howard and Bryan is this. Do you have to speak in all the languages that operas are written in? Thank you.
Izzy, that is such a good question.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. Hi, Izzy. That's a fantastic question.
So do you have to be able to speak all of those languages, or do you just have to be able to make the sounds of all of those languages?
I think many of us start from the place of knowing how to make the sounds. We understand how to make the sounds. But our goal, and I think of a lot of things in opera like this. Our goal is that eventually we would speak those languages and be able to use them. I was going to say idiomatically, use them in the way that a person who speaks that language at home would use the language. So I studied French in high school, and in fact, my mom is a French teacher, and so I had a lot of background in French, which helped learning Italian, and I speak a little bit of Spanish, helped with Spanish, and knowing the rules of how to pronounce them makes a lot more sense when you actually speak the language.
Yes.
And our goal, what we want the singers to do when they get up and are singing and performing, we want you to feel like they're talking to you in your language. Not that they're just imitating the sounds, but that they're actually connecting to you in your language. So our goal is to help, and our job is to help make that happen.
I always thought that would be useful too, because while you both have worked in New York for a very long time, a lot of opera professionals, for instance, opera singers, they travel extensively, and you have to have language mastery. It's useful so that you can perform, but I also thought it's useful so you can order a sandwich when you're in a foreign country.
It's true.
The other thing that happens sometimes is in a rehearsal, you might have the whole cast that's Italian and the conductor that's Italian or French, or let's say, and then so they will actually start speaking that language. So I don't know if you've had this, Howard, but
Absolutely.
You're the only non-native speaker in the room, and they'll sort of forget that, and so they'll just sort of start jumping and say, okay, let's start at this part, and so you do kind of have to be able to follow along. And I know that for me, my instinct was always to be shy. Like if I was visiting a country where I didn't speak the language, I was always very shy and afraid to make a mistake. But now I think it's good. I mean, people always appreciate if you just jump in. Doesn't matter if you make a mistake, just try, get your point across, communicate as best as you can. And so I've learned that, I guess, building that confidence of not being afraid of languages and not being afraid to make mistakes. And so it served me well over the years, because there are times where suddenly, everyone's speaking German. And so you've got to be able to follow along. So, and it shows, I guess, a certain amount of interest in their culture and their language. And so I think that they always appreciate it. If it's not your first language, but you're trying, I think that's something they always appreciate.
I think that is such good advice. Howard, you look like you were about to say something.
No, I love it that Bryan's saying that. That's absolutely true. And I think it's just fun to get to practice. Sometimes, you all who study languages at school probably know that you learn a few words, but then you never get to practice it, and by the time you come back, you've forgotten. So when we're in a rehearsal process where most of the people are Italian, everything's happening in Italian. I think when I first started at the Met, like Bryan, I was like, oh my God, I don't understand what anyone's saying. And now I'm like, yay, I get to practice Italian. It's perfect.
I love
It's
that.
really
I think that is such good advice, Brian. And I also think I, like you, was very shy and I sort of lacked the confidence to even give it a try because I didn't want to be bad at it. I didn't want to appear, sort of dumb about it. But I have discovered that if you are brave and you make that effort in that state of bravery where you might have like a little adrenaline in your system, boy, the learning just goes through the roof. It's just like you learn so much more so quickly and you gain mastery so much more quickly when you put yourself in that sort of brave position. I love
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
I love
Right.
that.
I remember when I was a student in the Young Artist program, they would send us for these language studies. So I went to Italy to study Italian for the summer. And on the way there, there was weather, so the flight was delayed and it was rerouted to another city. And all these things happened. And I had to get on the phone and call the person that I was staying with, the hotel, and explain all of this and try to explain in Italian, like the flight's been delayed and this, and I'm going to be late and I'm going to come at this time. And, you just try your best.
You do your
And
best.
it can be fun, we just try.
Tal is saying, I guess I'm more scared of making a mistake at a language I should know fluently, but I don't know. Tal, I'm afraid of making mistakes in English. So I feel you. I feel you deeply. But I also, something I've done, I was afraid when I was younger to say when I didn't know what a word meant, when somebody used a word and I didn't know what it meant. And I made a choice as a full on adult that I don't know, maybe like 15 years ago, I made a choice that I wouldn't just try to figure it out from context clues. If I had an opportunity, I would say, Brian, I heard you say the word celesta. I don't know that word. I've seen words like it. Can you tell me more about that word? And
Yeah,
that is a really fun way to live when you're sort of like, you're just yourself and you can ask questions and learn in real time.
exactly. Yeah.
So that being said, what was that word?
Celeste,
Wait,
the thing.
you have to stop, Brian.
Oh,
Howard, it's joke o'clock. It's joke o'clock.
Oh
Bring on the jokes.
no! Here we go.
This is from Allie in Quebec. Why was it so hot in the opera house after the opera was over? What do we think, friends? Why was it so hot in
Mm.
the opera house after the opera was over? I don't think it was that they turned off the air conditioning. I think it's going to be a good joke answer. Because all the fans left.
That's great.
I love it.
It's a
Yay,
good.
Ali. Good
That
one.
joke came all the way from Canada for you,
Yeah.
Brian, in your honor. So you were saying, what is that word?
Celesta. So that's an instrument. If you see it, it basically looks like a piano, but the inside's different. So it's hitting a bell instead of a string, and so it makes
Oh,
this really bell-like sound. So if you know the Tchaikovsky Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies, da,
can
da,
you sing it for me?
da, da,
Yeah.
that theme, that's played by the celesta. So it just sounds like bells, and that's an instrument that Howard and I have played a lot. And it makes its way into operas. You'll have a chord here or there, or a little section with the celesta. So it's a lot of fun.
Celesta. Is there an instrument? I could be making up words. Is there a Celestina? Is that a different thing? Is that a made
Maybe.
up thing?
I'm
Yeah,
not
I
sure.
that's
I
it. Same thing. Yeah.
I think I made that up. I might have made that up.
No, it's the same. I think it's the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Celesta. I think maybe I've been pronouncing words wrong, but not anymore.
No,
Celesta.
he's
Thank you.
saying in Italian, you're saying in English. It's the same thing. Yay.
I love that. So we've got another great question from Paige in Brooklyn, New York.
Hi,
So
Paige.
Hey, Paige.
Hi, my name is Paige and I live in Brooklyn, New York. My question for Howard and for Brian is how many hours a day do you practice the piano? Thank you.
oh,
Oh, that's a nice question.
that's
Hi,
a great
Paige.
question.
Are you a pianist also, Paige?
I wonder.
Hmm. For myself, I when I was in school, I always said that I would never play less than 4 hours. So in any day, I would play at least 4 hours a day.
Wow.
Now, because we're there rehearsing all day and practicing, it's hard sometimes to find time to practice outside of work. But I try to practice I'd say maybe 2 or 3 hours outside of work. And then we're playing most of 6 hours of a day. So it's a lot of physical activity in a day, a lot of playing piano.
Can I ask you, Brian, answer the question, then I have a little follow-up for you.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, I would say when I was young, I practiced a lot. I practiced many hours a day. And the thing about playing is that it uses the muscles. So it's very athletic in that sense, but it also uses your ear, it uses your emotions, it uses your brain. So it really, I find after those 6 hour days, I'm sort of drained, like my muscles are sore, so I try to practice a bit outside of that, but it is like we're athletes almost. I mean, we're using these little muscles in our fingers, and we're spending hours and hours a day doing them. So yeah, I try to take breaks and to rest as much as I can. But it really depends too. If I'm learning something new, I like to put a lot of hours into it right away, just to kind of get into it. So it sort of goes in waves, but it's a great question. Everyone always asks that. Everyone's curious about it because I think people realize it takes a lot of hours to just keep in shape and to keep it up. So it's great. It's lovely playing, and it's so it gives us expression and it gives us emotion, but it also it's a bit of work in a sense. It takes keeping in shape.
That is amazing. And my follow-up is, how do you take care of yourself? Are there things that you do physically? Are there exercises that you do? Is there physical therapy that you do to take care of it's not just your hands or your arms, it's also your back and your alignment. Are there things that you do to take care of yourself and keep yourself in shape so you can keep doing this work?
For me, definitely. I mean, so I feel like when I was a kid, I was invincible. I could practice as much as I want. I wouldn't have any injuries. I would be fine.
Yeah.
And then as I get a bit older, sitting down for 6 hours a day and playing gets to, you get sore. So I try to work out. And even in this period, of course, there are no gyms. We're all sort of at home. But yeah, I'm trying to work out at home, just doing a bit of exercise, keeping in shape. For me, it's my back that gets sore usually because I'm sitting. So I try to do stretches. And I try to just listen to my body, because if you're ever feeling pain, that means you should stop. And I think as musicians, we're not always taught that. We're taught, just keep going and the music will keep you strong and this sort of thing. But no, if you feel pain, like any athlete would do, they would stop, they would ice the muscle, they would take care of it. But as musicians, we're not always taught that. So I'm trying to teach myself now, pain, stop, take a rest. It's not worth hurting yourself.
Yeah. How about you, Howard?
Yes, I do. I do a lot of stretching. I think stretching is really fantastic. It helps you stay flexible. Like Brian, I also am missing my gym time. I like to work out a lot. I try to go every day just to keep my body healthy, keep all the cookies that I eat from staying on me. In fact, I just bought a new bike last week, so I've been out riding a lot on my bike, and I'm going to go for a long ride after this today. One thing that's very important for us, that's one reason that we have to prepare so well and prepare in advance, is you are less likely to injure yourself when you really know something well. So if we're in a rehearsal, remember we talked about having 3 or 4 hours in a day of playing, maybe even just a little section. If we know the music well and are not struggling physically with how does this go, we're less likely to get injured. If you're playing something that you don't really know so well and you're struggling and you're tight, you know how sometimes you get physically tense when you don't know how something goes or when you're worried? We try to get rid of all of that and be as relaxed as possible. So the more that you can do, the better for your learning and the better for everybody.
That is so interesting. So the more familiarity and mastery you have, where your hands are headed, where you're going to go, the more flowing it is, the less prone you are to injury.
Yes, definitely.
This is why I love Career Corner. Ariella is saying, Howard, I can relate about the cookies. Ariella, We are all feeling the cookies right now. Maybe I'm projecting. I'll just speak for myself and you, Ariella. But yeah. I love that there's cookies at the ready. That is awesome.
Exactly.
That is awesome. We have a great. This is like Ben is going to hit us with a question. Ben, in addition to your other talents, I think you should be a journalist. This is such a good question from Ben.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ben from Kansas City, Missouri. I have a question. Is there something a teacher told you or a particular piece of music that changed the way you play piano? Thanks.
What a great question.
Wow, I love that.
Oh, wow.
Good job, Ben.
So let's start with you, Brian. Is there something that a teacher told you or a particular piece of music that changed the way you play the piano? I thought this was such a good question.
That's incredible. That's such a great question. I have to think, I would say one thing that sort of, I hope, answers this question a bit. I would say that working on opera in general and working with singers in general has really taught me as a pianist to make a sound that's very singing and very orchestral and very dramatic, because Howard and I are around singers all day. We're around the orchestra all day. And that affects the way we play. So I find that after all these years at the Met, now when I play the piano, I'm sort of imagining those sounds and those colors and all that drama, and I'm trying to bring it to my own playing. So whether I'm playing an opera score or a piano piece or a solo piece, I find that soaking up those sounds and soaking up all that drama that we're around has really made me a better pianist and a better musician. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I would say that just being around opera has really taught me a lot and made me a better musician and pianist.
That's a pretty cool answer, to just sort of sponge it up and let that inform your work as a musician. I think that's pretty great. How about you, Howard?
I had a really good teacher. I had a lot of good teachers, but the one teacher in my master's used to talk a lot about really listening to what you're doing. And one thing that's possible for us pianists to get into is playing all the time, but not actually listening to the sounds that we're making. It's just so easy for it to become like typing on a keyboard instead of something that keeps where your ears are alive and your mind is really involved in what you're doing. So I think after the years of studying with that teacher, I became much more aware of trying to have an idea of what sound I wanted to make before I went to make the sound.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that helped me a lot actually in preparing operas and in just the way I practice. So instead of sitting playing 4 hours at the piano, maybe it's better to sit for 2 hours studying how the music goes and listening to it and getting it in my ear. And then I really have something to do in the other 2 hours, which is make the sounds that are already in my imagination.
Wow. So what you're describing to me sounds like the quality of your practice over the quantity of your practice.
Absolutely.
And sort of like a different approach to it. Would you learn those sounds because you had made them before, or would you learn them by listening to recordings of the music that you were trying to master?
That's a great question, Susan. Wow, it's a little bit of a combination of both. That's one thing that it'll feel like I'm on a tangent, but one thing that's really fun about playing orchestra music on the piano, which is what we're doing all day, is we get to try to imitate the sounds of those instruments. So we think of different ways to make sounds. I mean, you might have just kind of a really fast boop, and that makes a sharper sound that might sound more like a percussion instrument or more like a wind instrument. We might have a more smooth sound, which also has a different approach, kind of something, I can't find it. There's something more like this that then sounds more like string instruments. So having already those sounds in your ear of what's supposed to be when it's going to be with orchestra, then affects how you practice. Oh, I don't just do everything like this. I maybe do a few moments like this and some moments like this, other moments, another kind of gesture. And it's unending. It's like a painter with a paintbrush. Different ways. It's not that you just take the paintbrush and always just do this. You might do some dabs. You might do some swoops. all kinds of
Yes.
different things.
Again, while I listen to you, I'm just thinking about how for you to have these careers, all the different kinds of mastery that you have to have in terms of even the way, Brian, you were describing the experience of playing the piano, whether that is in practice, whether that's in performance, whether that's in rehearsal, that it engages your brain, it engages your emotions, it engages your body. There's so, and then there's just so many things. Dancing Cat 2.0, I love these answers too. Isn't it it's such a treat to get to listen to both of you talk about your careers and your work in this way, because it is I don't know, I feel like it's making my brain bigger, which is always good. Always good. Oh, Diego is saying, I wish you
Oh,
could be my teachers. Today they are. Today they are our teachers, and we're
exactly.
so lucky. We're so lucky to have you as our teachers. I that is a fascinating answer, Howard. I love that. Um, Daphne from Halifax has a
Oh,
great question. Here we go.
My name is Daphne and I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. My question for the assistant conductors is, could you please explain the audition process for the Met Orchestra? Thank you.
So the audition process for the Met Orchestra, is that another piece of your job that you're involved in? Are you all around for that?
We're not really involved in that per se. Sometimes, as part of their audition process, they have to play an excerpt from a concerto. And in that part of the process, the orchestra people will come and get one of us to play the orchestra part on the piano. I think I've done it maybe once or twice, not a lot. And I think, Brian, you've done that, right?
yeah. I get so nervous because it's one thing to play for yourself. It's one thing when it's for someone else and it's their audition and it's the job and it's their future. I would get so nervous for those.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you could tell us, though? Do you know a little bit about the audition process in case there are any people watching today who aspire to be part of the Met Orchestra?
Well, I don't know a lot, but I would just say that the Met Orchestra, of course, is very high level orchestra, and so I think they limit how many applications they accept, and probably invite only a certain number of people to come, and they will give you a number of famous orchestra excerpts. So, like, remember how Brian was talking about Celesta, the Sugar Plum Fairy? There are lots of little bits from opera that are famous for that instrument, like a certain violin solo that's really famous that everyone knows, or a certain big cello solo that's really famous, like in the opera Don Giovanni. There's a really great, big, beautiful cello solo from Zerlina's aria. So when person comes to audition, they'll have to play a sample of all those different excerpts that's been told to them ahead of time, and they will have prepared it, and it'll be the best version they can do. And there you have it. Brian, go for it. It's a little noisy here. I'm going to put on my mute for a second.
No, and I was going to say, I mean, that's how it works. And I think in terms of preparation, if anyone's listening, and if there are young musicians listening, I think everyone that wins these jobs tells me they prepare so far in advance and they do practices. So you can do little practice auditions for your friends, for your family, for your cat, because it's normal. We get nervous.
Cats love opera.
They do. Cats love, it's true. But so my friends that have done these auditions say that it's just a matter of preparing. And there's so much that's out of our control in life and in these circumstances, but there's so much that we can control. And so if you can make it so you're a little less nervous on that day by doing these practices, then, by all means, go for it. We have to do anything we can to, prepare as best as possible. And, but it is hard. I mean, and the other thing is, from what I understand, these auditions are done behind a screen. So you're in a room and there's a screen. You don't see who you're playing for. You're kind of just alone in a room. So that can be nerve-wracking too, because you don't know who's on the other side of the screen and you're just sort of playing for yourself. So, as much as you can do to practice and prepare and learning the excerpts in advance, I think that's the best you can do.
Brian,
And
do they do that so that they're just judging the quality of the sound that's being created, so that there's no unfair bias or anything like that? Is that why
I
they
think
have the screen up?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay,
So they're just judging on how the person plays, and that's it. I
got
think.
it. Howard, you were about to say something.
No, just that. Absolutely. It's nothing to do with how you look or anything like that. It's all just how you sound. And you can. It's fun to practice. What's hard sometimes is the idea that you have to play from the beginning to the end without stopping. So what you can do when you're practicing at home is put a chair there and say, okay, this is the person I'm going to play for, and now I'm playing the whole excerpt to you in the chair. Even though there's not someone there, it'll still feel a little different. And so you can practice that. I would do, like we talked about, doing things in advance. 3 weeks before the audition, sit with your chair, your empty chair, and say, okay, that's my mom in the chair. I'm now going to play all my excerpts and play through all of them. Then a couple days later, have a friend come and that person can be in the chair. I'm going to play all the excerpts, but I'm not going to stop. That's the important thing. No stopping. And
love
it will
that.
get better and better and better and better.
And I think it does something when there's somebody observing you. Again, it gives you a little bit of adrenaline,
Yeah.
which is sort of a simulation of the actual audition. And it helps you just normalize playing in front of people that make you a little nervous, which is
Right.
good. Yeah,
Right.
I love that. It's joke o'clock! Friends, it's joke o'clock! Hit us with a joke. Hit us with a good one. This is from Ben in Kansas City, Missouri. Ben, you're so featured on this episode of Career Corner. I love it. How did Mozart decorate his garden? Any ideas, friends? How did Mozart decorate? I really do try to solve these jokes, and they're good and they're tough with metronomes.
Ben is very clever.
Ben, that is a very solid grade A joke. I
All
love
right,
that.
Ben.
I love that. I always love during Career Corner to play a round of roses and thorns, which is to say, I'd love to hear from both of you. What is one of the most challenging aspects of your job? That's the thorns. And roses, what is the part of your job that you love? So why don't we start with you, Howard?
Okay.
What's one of the most challenging parts of your job?
Well, let's challenging part. We're as you hear, we're all excited and very passionate about our work and how it goes. If someone comes and for whatever reason hasn't been able to do the preparation far in advance, or they come and they're not as prepared as they would love to be, we almost feel like a parent who's responsible for them. And it can be really hard if they're in not such great shape. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens sometimes. And it's a big part of our job to get rid of being frustrated and just help make it better. But it can be frustrating, and we may have to chat about it after work over coffee.
That sounds stressful. Brian, how about you? What's one of the more challenging parts of your job?
For me, it's keeping up with the workload, because in any given season, we go through, like, I don't know, 2,000 pages of music maybe, or like 15 hours of music.
That's so much music.
Yeah.
It's a lot of music. So just keeping up with all the notes and keeping up with, being on top of it, because like we said, it's not enough to just play these orchestra parts. You actually have to know the languages, you have to know the words, you have to know the singer's parts. So for me, it's just keeping up with the sheer amount of work that's really challenging. And the best part for me is the people, because we're surrounded by such incredible friends and wonderful people. And like I said, I really couldn't do the job if I didn't have such great colleagues. I would have disappeared a long time ago. So that's the only reason I can keep it up.
So your roses are your people. I love that. Howard, how about you? Who are your roses, or what are your roses?
My roses are, well, there's another part of the job that we haven't even talked about today. I don't know if you all know about prompters. A prompter, sometimes on a stage, you may see a little bump in the front. There's often a person inside there, and that person is helping the singers on stage with the words, and if they can't see the conductor very well, helping them know where to sing. it's mostly to suggest the words, tell them what the words are ahead of time. But when you're in that place, when one of us is in that place in a performance, seeing the singers up close and the pure, I can't even get words, it's so amazing, the pure artistry and emotion and love coming off of the singers when you're that close to them is amazing. It's
Howard,
amazing.
I am with you. I do because I host so many events, and when it's not a pandemic, many live events. I have
Yeah.
these, and I interview so many people. I have had so many opportunities in my life where I sit near someone or next to someone while the most extraordinary sounds spool out of their faces. It is one of the most thrilling parts of my, not even my job, but of my life. It
Yeah.
is, it's crazy. It's like it's like you're in the presence of God. It's
Yeah.
really something.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that.
It's incredible. It's probably the thing I miss the most during this time, that we can't be around with the singers and can't get to experience that from them right now. But
Yeah.
it's coming back. It's coming back.
That's right. It's coming back. We have a great question from Marius, also from Canada. Let's hear it.
Oh, these
Hi, I'm Marius from Prince Edward Island, Canada. I saw during some behind the scenes that some second conductors conduct backstage with a little screen in front of them in which the conductor conducts the orchestra, but it's all live. So one, is it hard having to look at a little screen and making sure it's exactly on time? And two, what if the screen glitches? Thank you.
Those are good questions.
Wow, I love this. Amazing. Brian,
So-
you want to take it?
Oh,
So
sure.
is that hard to work with the parameters of that little tiny screen?
Yeah, so I guess what he was talking about is the backstage conducting. So a lot of operas have music written where there's music backstage. Like it could be in a party scene where the composer wants it to sound like the music's just sort of happening on stage. And it is hard, actually. I've never done it myself, but I've been backstage to see it being done. And so those screens, first of all, there's a slight delay. So you can't go exactly with the screen. You have to sort of anticipate a little bit because there's a delay. And just you have to listen, but you have to look and you have to know what the conductor in the pit is doing. It is actually really challenging. And I think it's sort of like juggling where you just have all these components to deal with. And in terms of the glitch, actually, when I was playing in the pit, the piano part in Lulu, we were doing the HD broadcast, which of course everyone's nervous and it's a big deal. And in the location I was in the pit, I couldn't see the conductor. So I had a screen myself playing along. And about 20 minutes into it, it started to flicker. And then after a few minutes, it just went out completely. And with a piece as complicated as Lulu, which has so many changes of tempo, you really need to see the conductor. So I made it through. And then at intermission, I ran up to the stage manager and I just said, this has happened and we really need to fix it because it's HD. And so that happens, with opera, with hundreds of people on stage in the pit, working backstage, there's always going to be some little glitch. I mean, there's never a perfect performance. So everyone's just doing the best they can. And, that's humanity. We all have flaws and that's what makes it beautiful in a way too.
Yeah.
And add problem solving to the list of things that I think every single person who's been in the career corner has talked about, that need for problem solving, and sometimes in very time sensitive situations.
Yeah, I would say that's actually one of my favorite things about the Met, actually. In those moments when a problem happens, I have discovered that the people at the Met in all departments are absolutely amazing, truly amazing. They can solve. I had a similar problem that Brian had once. At the beginning of the show, we always go and test everything to make sure that it's going to work okay. And when I was going to play Tosca, play the organ in Tosca, the end of the first act has a huge organ part, and a lot of it is only the organ. So I went to test the organ, and while I was playing it, it suddenly stopped working. So this was at about 5 minutes before the show was going to start, and I had to get the stage management, and we had to quickly try to figure something out. It didn't work. They had to do a workaround. But meanwhile, the opera had already started, so we couldn't test anything. So when it came time for the moment, we all just had to stay there with the prayer, and yes, it played. It sounded
Can I
very
ask,
scary.
do you remember what the workaround was? Did you do
They got a keyboard.
something electronic
Yeah,
or?
they did something electronic. They got a keyboard that they put in another, even on another by the stage manager's desk. So it's up one floor from where it usually would be. They set it up with some speakers and connected it to the speaker system, but that's all very complicated. And usually you have to test things to get the sound just right. No chance to do any of
So
that.
that first moment when a finger hit that keyboard, was it like,
The tension of everybody. Well, it was just like this. It was incredible. Is it going to happen, or is the show going to stop? And, yeah.
oh my gosh, it's so funny. There's so much drama on the Met stage, but
Oh my
there is so
God.
much drama off stage. We have another great video question, and this is from Zach in Chicago, Illinois.
Hi, my name is Zach, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States of America. My question for Bryan and for Howard is, how many countries have you been to performing your music? Thank you.
Love it, Zach.
Great
I love
question.
your international shirt and bringing us from Chicago.
Very
So,
good.
how many countries have you been to performing your music?
That's a great question, Zach. Oh my goodness. I don't know exactly. I've been to many countries in Western Europe, Central Europe, certainly Canada and Mexico, the Far East in Japan a lot of times, Korea, Taiwan, and Israel also a little bit in the Middle East.
Wow.
Never to Africa, never to Antarctica. Yes to South America. So I don't know the exact number, but I'm always looking for more. So I love going traveling. That's my
I
favorite.
love that. How about you, Bryan?
Yeah, I guess Western Europe, Asia for sure, Canada, the US. And I would say one of the fun things about traveling, of course, you have to balance it because you're working, so you have to still do your practice and you have to do the concert. But then there are moments where you can slip out and maybe see a museum or go for a walk and see the city. So, usually my family and friends, they think, oh, you get to travel. It's so great. It's like, well, yes, it is work as well. So you have to sort of balance that. But it is a wonderful way to see the world. And usually when you do these concerts, the presenters and the people organizing the concerts are very friendly and they tell you things in the city that you should see and that sort of thing. So it's really wonderful. But it can be stressful because if you're jet lagged and you have to perform and you're tired, or maybe you get sick on the plane and you don't know which medication to find in the new country and all that sort of stuff. So it's not all glamour, but it is. I mean, we're very grateful to get to travel, but there's a lot of work involved in it too.
Yeah, yeah. We're nearing the end of our time together. This has been so great to get to hear you speak and learn from you. I do like to ask every artist who comes into this career corner this question, which is, before you go, is there any, you have such amazing careers and you've led such interesting lives. Do you have any good advice for us? Any good advice that you want to make sure that we know before you leave the career corner?
I loved what we were talking about at the beginning about just trying things and don't be afraid. One thing I'm working on a lot in my life right now is getting rid of the word should. Don't think so much about what you should do. Just do things. Have fun. Try things. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. It doesn't matter. People are usually less worried about the mistake and more happy that you're trying to do something or that you're trying to connect to them. So try as much as you can to be fearless. Throw yourself out there. Nobody's judging you.
I love that, Howard. Bryan,
I
are
love.
you able to match it or top it?
I cannot match that. No, that's brilliant. I think be fearless and also be kind. Like this music, I
Come
think
on.
all of the music teaches us to be good people, and we see what happens when people aren't good people in the operas. It doesn't turn out well for them. So just be nice. Be nice to the people around you and share your joy and share your passions. And just life is short, so just enjoy it and be nice to people.
Absolutely.
Howard, Bryan, can I just, on behalf of everybody who is watching this, can I just thank you for coming and spending time with us? You are both so talented, and you balance that with being so kind,
Oh,
and
thank
we're
you.
we're so appreciative to be on the receiving end of your generosity today.
Thank you. We're really honored to be here. It's great. Love
Thank
it.
Ariel is sending her thanks too. Thank you so much, Howard and Bryan. You guys are awesome. I'm so inspired. I feel the
Thanks,
same
Allie.
way.
Thank you.
Daphna's sending thanks. Thank you, friends. I can't wait to meet you both in person one day.
Yeah.
Yes, that'll be great. Absolutely.
Maybe in New York, maybe in Dayton, maybe in Canada. I don't know. It's a crazy world and a wild life, but wherever it is, I cannot wait.
We'll look forward.
Fun.
Bye,
Thank you.
friends.
Bye.
How awesome are they? How awesome are they? It's one of the reasons I love working with the Met, because I really meant what I said. Every single person that I've ever met from the Met is they're just amazing. They're so good at their jobs, and they're so I don't know. There's a kindness and I don't know. I just feel so lucky to get to meet and talk to so many of these very cool people. That made my day. So, coming up next week on the Career Corner, oh, this is gonna be good. We've got Susie Gomez Pizzo. Susie is the Met's ladies wardrobe supervisor. The ladies wardrobe supervisor. So we learned when we talked to Robert Bulla that there's a difference between costume and wardrobe. So Susie is going to talk to us about what it's like to run and supervise wardrobe, and you know that Susie is going to have some good stories about problem solving under time sensitive situations. Woo, woo, you know she's going to tell us about those quick changes. So be sure, if you would like to, send some video questions for Susie. If you have an interest in opera or in general, oh, Gracie, you're so welcome. It is my pleasure to be here hosting today's camp festivities. But do send questions for Susie to summercamp@metopera.org. I love those video questions so much. They make me so happy. And don't forget that tomorrow is everybody's favorite Camper Showcase. It's tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Time. If you haven't submitted your creations, you still have time. I have to tell you, it is one of my great joys in life to look at the creations that you all submit. They make me so happy, and your creativity just like it rocks my socks. But you can still submit through the Google Classroom, or you can email it to summercamp@metopera.org. Thanks for staying a little over time. As always, it is my pleasure, and I will see you next week in the Career Corner.